All right. I am really, really, really excited to join all of you guys at BeMore. My name is Milton Jackson, and I'm the Senior Vice President, Executive Director of XD for Wealth, Financial Wellness, Retirement, and Rewards at Bank of America. It is an honor to be presenting for you guys today. What we're going to talk about basketball, and we're going to talk about design. And what I want to do is give you guys just a little bit of, um, my experience as a design leader. So, first of all, right, let's suit up, right? We're going to do a little bit of pregame, and in the pregame, I'm going to talk about me and my background. We'll talk about my stellar MVP career as a basketball player. And then, we'll talk about the realities of design leadership all in the pregame. Then we'll jump into the game of design leadership and design management. Four topics that I'll cover: um, represent, how to represent. We'll talk about family. We'll talk about finding balance, and then we'll do a little bit about the differences between creative direction and design leadership. You guys see the basketball analogy throughout the presentation. Look forward to that. And then in the post game, I want to turn it to all of you to ask any questions that you might have, anything that you want to know. I will tell you, I'm an open book. Don't feel like any question is silly. I'm always open and willing to take it. It's all right. So pregame. Again, my name is Milton Jackson, SVP and Executive Director of XD at Bank of America. My portfolio of work at the bank, I lead four big XD portfolios. One is wealth in the Merrill Lynch space, financial wellness, also our rewards and deals XD team, and also our retirement or benefits online experience design team. Um, the number one thing that we do at the bank as an XD team is we design for the full spectrum of clients that are, members of our ecosystem, and that spans from the financially vulnerable all the way to the financially thriving. So our job is to make sure that we're empowering those clients to really make smart financial decisions. Things like buying houses, buying cars, saving for retirement, saving for college. All of those things are products that are within our suite. I've worked across five different industries in my career. I've worked in industrial. I've worked in sports and broadcasting. I've worked in education, manufacturing, insurance and risk management, and now I'm excited to be in the banking space. Um, I've been doing design for a little over 20 years. And I know I look very young and I hide the gray hairs very well. If you ask members of my team, their gray hairs will pop back up at the end of 2 weeks. And then the next day they disappear. Um, so I was formerly the AVP and head of design at the Hartford, overseeing all design for their customer-facing platforms and portals, and also some internal, technology transformation initiatives. Um, I was born in Jamaica, and I spent my first sort of years there in a little village called Anne's Delight, which is in the northeastern part of the island. But I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and so the basketball analogy actually comes from the fact that Connecticut is the self-proclaimed basketball capital of the world. Home of the Connecticut Sun, home of the world famous UConn Huskies, probably the second closest team that we have to a professional basketball team. And also home to two of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. That is Jim Calhoun and Gino Auriemma. I went to Eastern Connecticut State University, which is literally down the street from the University of Connecticut. I got a bachelor's degree in history and social sciences, and also later on, I got a master's degree from the University of Maryland in technology entrepreneurship. All right. So let's just sort of settle on one thing. I've not played basketball in probably 30 years. And the reality of my basketball career was it was just not very good. I was not very good. And if you were to ask me to play today, you would see I'm still not very good. However, I won MVP. And the reason I won MVP was not because I was the best player. It was not because I had the greatest jump shot, or I could shot block, or crossover or anything like that. This kid with the Batman belt was not going to be a NBA professional player. That's just the reality of it. However, I showed up, and I won MVP because I showed up for every game. I was at every practice. Every shot that I was asked to make, I took. Whether I made it or not, didn't matter. I took the shot. I made every block, every rebound, every free throw. And the reality is, I accepted the fact very earlier on that I was not very good at basketball. But the reason I got MVP was because I showed up for the team. I cheered loud on the sidelines. I helped coach up other players when they were feeling down. Um, you know, my mom would bring toys and treats and all that stuff for all the kids on the team. The reality was that I learned at a very young age that 50% of being good and being great is simply showing up. And that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did for my team. So how does that translate, right? One of the things that we all, as designers and design leaders, have a hard time wrapping our heads around is, as our careers grow, um, there's a road that splits at a certain point, and you have to make a decision of whether you want to be a leader but an individual contributor, or if you want to be a leader and manage people. I do want to be a little bit more transparent in the fact that a lot of what you're going to see here is focused on someone who wants to manage people, but a lot of the tokens can also be used if you're an individual contributor. And the first thing, and this is still a part of pregame, which is sort of the realities of design leadership, is it is uncomfortable. And that it is uncomfortable because you see a lot of these symptoms, right? Like when you get into a design leadership role, you have a lot of trepidation. You second guess yourself. You ask yourself the question, like, should I be here? Do I deserve to be here? Am I qualified to be here? And in some cases, you see a fair amount of early attrition, when you take over a team. And some of those are symptoms of change. Some of those are symptoms of culture. And some of those are, you have folks who just have a hard time aligning to your vision. Attrition is okay, right? And I'll say that again, attrition is okay. Because a lot of times you have a vision that you want to deploy. And in many cases, some of the people who leave are the people who do not and are not willing to adopt that vision. One of the things that I do want to touch on, though, is this concept of imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is both real and not real. I think it is both a struggle and a motivator. And so, for anyone who is looking and is stepping up into design leadership, I think it's important for you to remember that you've earned that seat. You've earned that space. You've earned that position. You've earned that salary. You've earned the growth to be able to manage people and manage their careers. You've demonstrated both the confidence, and you've demonstrated the aptitude to lead people. And so there's no need to really suffer through imposter syndrome. And if you're going through that and you want somebody to sort of help you out in figuring out how to navigate that, like by all means, like you grab time on my ADP list, because I will do the best that I can to coach you through that. Some of the cures, right, of removing the discomfort of design leadership. Number one, build relationships with your teams. And I'm not talking about surface level business oriented relationships. I'm talking about getting to know the people on your team at a deep familial level, understanding what they care about, understanding where they want to go, understanding their family dynamics and family history as much as they're willing to share. Because at the end of the day, that allows you to manage your team with empathy, and that is crucial, critical, and important. The second thing I'd say, begin to give feedback to your leaders, to your designers based on your experiences. What does that mean? That means tell your story, right? Allow them to understand that you've gone through similar experiences, and that they're not alone. And I think that is critical. Build your confidence through routines. One of the things that we do at the bank is we start the week together, um, and we end the week pretty much together. And most of we'll do a design critique at the end of the day on a Thursday. So we start together and we'll pretty much end the week together, and that's important, right? It's important because then you have the routines, you know what's going on, you know who's who, you know who's working on what, and that knowledge gets funneled out to the rest of the organization because you feel confident and that's demonstrated. Um, there's two other things: empowerment, mentorship, and sponsorship. Empowerment is coaching in real time. Mentorship is managing people, where they want to go, what they would like to do, but not necessarily directing them, providing them with options. And that is really, really critical. And sponsorship is to be the voice for someone that is not in the room, right? That is a voice in career growth, a voice in career promotions, progressions, ratings, reviews, right? Like be a voice for someone who is not in the room. And that's critical to help other people grow. But as you represent your team, managers, leaders will recognize the fact that you stand up for your team and will therefore stand up for you also. All right, so let's jump into the game, right? Let's fold off on representing your team. I think it's really, really important to know that if you demonstrate care, if you really demonstrate that you care about your team and you care about their families and what they're going through, the team will represent you. And the way they do that is by doing great work. So your content strategists, your visual designers, your experience designers, your researchers, the more you show up for them, the more they will show up for you. Second point is defend the team and their decisions in real time. Sometimes their decisions could be wrong. Defend them anyway. And then when you feel the moment and you have a one-on-one, sit back and provide them with the feedback and say, "Hey, I defended you because I want you to know and understand that this is the role of a leader. However, here are the things that I want you to work on and improve and maybe even change in the experience that you just created." Advocate for your starters, which is essentially advocating for your high performers, right? Advocate for the people who are, if we want to use the basketball analogy, your starting five, right? Make sure that the world knows who they are, but also recognize and reward the people who are on your bench. because they are the ones who truly make you successful. They're the ones who are pushing your starting five to be better, right? Like I think the quote that you see on the screen right now is from Don Staley, who's the University of South Carolina women's basketball head coach. Um, Dawn won the national championship last year. The University of South Carolina did, and she sort of in an interview with Fortune magazine, she'd had this quote of, I have to give a real good shout out to the players who don't get into the game a lot. We have 16 players, and a lot of them, probably 7 or 8, never got to shine. They never got to play in the championship game. So I'm going to give them the shine right now. That is demonstration of someone who shows up for their team. And it's really, really important for you as a leader to remember that it's not just the people who are, top tier, grinding every single day, all of the partners and product managers, and they're speaking at conferences, and they're the ones sort of in the shine. That's great, but also recognize the people that make them great. So I think that's a really, really important thing to remember. All right, next one. Treat your team like family. There's a little bit of a caveat here, right? And you'll see the cross out in the middle. You don't want to treat them like brothers and sisters, um, because it's hard to get rid of brothers and sisters. You don't choose them, right? Like they're chosen for you. um, Treat them like second or third cousins, right? Like you want to love them enough where you feel like they're close to you and they're family, um, but also you also want to love them enough where if they leave and leave the company you're working for or decide to do something different, um, that you're okay with them moving away. Um, but it's important to invest in people's success, right? And that's where that idea of mentorship and sponsorship comes into play. It is almost the design industry itself is very small. Even the worldwide design industry is very small. And so it's important to remember that you're going to work together again at some point or another. So treat them like family. When they move away, stay in touch. Follow up. How you doing? What's going on? Are you facing any challenges? Can I help coach you? What's important to you right now? Right? Those are really, really important conversations to have, even when someone has left your team, because ultimately you may change teams, and you may be recruiting, and you may want to add additional people, or they may be recruiting. They may want someone to join their team, right? And they may want you to come and help drive whatever mission that they're trying to drive. So it's really, really important, right, to treat them like family, build the relationships you want to build, and coach them through any experiences that they're sort of dealing with. So you don't want to be these three, right? You don't want to be these three brothers who are all playing on the same team in the NBA right now. But you do want to treat them like close cousins. Um, Another sort of Don Staley anecdote, right? One of the things that I've remembered over and over again, and I've had to sort of constantly remind myself, is that there is a difference between creative direction and design leadership. And it took me until I was head of design at a company called the Hartford, to really understand what that meant. If you think about in basketball, coaches draw up plays, right? Like you're in a crunch situation, 3 seconds left on the clock. You're sitting there with your team. and you're drawing up a play, tie game or you're down one, and you need the team to execute. When you draw up the play, I think every coach will probably tell you the play is never run in the exact way that you call it up, right? Depending on how the defense positions themselves, right? Someone is going to be out of position. Creative direction is drawing up the play and really thinking that that play is going to run exactly how you want it to run. It's focused on the moment, and the thing that you're looking at, the situation that you're in, and you're trying to, in real time, provide the input that the team needs in order to be successful. So you're guiding the team into a particular direction, you're giving feedback, but you're focused on that immediate thing that the team is working on. Design leadership is about creating a macro environment where people deliver the right solutions. It's focused on driving both business outcome, but very much importantly, the process you use to empower designers to deliver the right business outcome. The con to design leadership is sometimes anecdotal feedback. The feedback that you need to give to the team right then and there can get lost. Because what you're doing in design leadership is you're giving the team options, right? Like you're giving them ways to succeed, not a way to succeed. And that's really, really important. So understand the difference between design leadership and creative direction. And use that as a superpower, right? Like there are moments where you will need to give creative direction, and there are moments where you need to do design leadership. All right. Last thing, put diversity, equity, inclusion into your playbook, right? One really, really interesting fact. There was a research study that was done by I don't remember the name of the journal, that focused on representation of NBA championship teams. And what they found was teams that were actually diverse. And when I say diverse, I'm talking about racial diversity. If we're talking about the NBA, racial diversity, demographic, socioeconomic ability, language, and race, right? The research study actually pointed out to the fact that the teams in the last 20 or so years that were more diverse were more apt to win the NBA championship than teams that were homogenous. So think about that for a second. We're talking about athletes, right? The more diverse the team, the higher the likelihood of them winning the NBA championship. Right? So let's translate that into design, right? If we are to be the stewards of experience, the stewards of product, I think it's really, really important for us to remember that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging really helps us to drive the creation of the experiences that we're creating, right? If we want to serve a broad array of customers, if we want to drive better business outcomes, you have to capture diverse perspectives. You have to think about the nuances of the experiences that we're designing. You see at the bottom of the slide, right? The key question that I continue to ask myself both intrinsically and explicitly is, how are minoritized communities going to react to this thing that we are creating? How are they going to react to the experience? How are they going to react to the content? How are they going to react to the images that we put into the experience? So it's important for us to really put DE and I and belonging into our playbook, so that we can do a better job at delivering high quality product. All right, we'll wrap up. Um, I think the one thing that I live by, and that is really really important to me, is a recognition that, as much as it is important to focus on your team, it's your career, right? It's really really important for you to kind of understand that it is your career. You have to have it mean something to you. But for me and my mission, I think it's really, really important for me to have my career and the things that I've done or will do mean something to someone else. So just the one piece of sort of advice and encouragement that I would give is, be a design leader, be a design mentor, be a design sponsor, and advocate for the people, not just on your team, but who are also in your ecosystem. So that's basketball and the lessons I've learned in design leadership. Thank you guys. I'm gonna turn it over to you. I think we're gonna do some Q&A.
Yes. Thank you so much, Milton. I really enjoyed the I really enjoyed your session. I even forgot to remind you of the time, but we finished just in time for Q&A. We have some good questions as well. So I'm going to bring up the first question from Marvin. He's asking, what if the bench doesn't view themselves as a bench player, but more of a starter player?
Oh, I love that question. I think a lot of times, people really sort of think about themselves in a positive way, and that is good. Like, you should always sort of think about yourself in a positive way. Um, all players, regardless of where they sit on the team, require coaching, right? So for a player that you think is on the bench but want to be a starter, coach them to be a starter, right? Give them the feedback, give them the growth opportunity, create the career development plans, and allow them to understand, like, hey, I totally will recognize you as a starter player, but here are these things that I want you to work on, right? And that's really really important in your role as a design leader, because you will change roles at some point, right? And members of your team will change roles at some point. You need to have a clear succession plan. And the only way you can build that is by spending time, investing in all of the players, but more importantly, as I say about recognizing your bench players, more importantly, the people who need the growth opportunities, like, you really want to spend time with them. So yes, like, I totally get it. If there's someone on your team that doesn't necessarily see themselves as a bench player, make sure you're transparent with them and say, here are your opportunities. Here are the areas that I want you to grow in.
Great answer. Thank you very much. I'll move on to the next question from Sunil. He's asking how to show leadership skills when you are at a junior level.
Yeah, again, like, another great question. The as a junior designer, it's important to use your voice. And it's also important to recognize when you know something and when you don't know something. Leadership is just as much about demonstrating confidence in what you know, but also being transparent about when something comes up, that you actually don't know, right? Your leadership journey begins when you start admitting the things that you don't know, or realizing the things that you don't know, and working on those. So the more you work on those, the more you will demonstrate leadership skill sets. Right? So simple things: public speaking, um, oration, asking questions in workshops, not necessarily answering questions, but being provocative, right? A lot of people say like, oh, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, right? Um, who better to play devil's advocate than a junior designer who's trying to understand what is happening around them, right? So use that as a superpower. So again, like it's really, really important. If you are in a junior role and you want to demonstrate your leadership, use your voice, ask questions, do not pretend that you know. And there, I promise you, there's probably somebody else in the room that doesn't know and is afraid to ask.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Simina. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I think her question is about how can you tell if the team is demotivated or are just not giving their best?
Yeah, this happens in a number of different scenarios. One of the scenarios is when you have truly a lack of leadership. But more importantly, it happens when you have a lack of culture. So focus as a design leader, focus on building the culture, not that you want. Spend time with the team trying to understand what is the culture that they want. Understand the incentives that are important to them. Understand the things that will motivate them. And then correlate the world around those insights. It's no different than doing like a experience research project, right? Like spend time with your customers, understand what's important to them, understand what their needs are, and then design a solution around it, right? Demotivated employees, demotivated designers. A lot of times it's really a lack of engagement in the culture or the environment that they're in. Change the culture, change the environment, and you will push the buttons of some people on the team.
Love the answer. So good. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is I want to bring this up onto the stage first because I think a lot of people actually have this fear, right? How to overcome the fear of questioning.
So the power of design, the entire reason we exist is to answer questions and to solve problems. But in order to answer questions, you have to know what the questions are. And so you need to figure out like, how is it that I'm going to wrap my head around this problem? The only way to do that is to demonstrate curiosity. Curiosity is a skill in design that's really pivotal to your success. And so the idea of asking questions is pivotal to your success as a designer. Don't be afraid to do it. No question is stupid. The early on in my career, I would, and this is during the time that I was working in manufacturing. I remember we would go into these design meetings, and there would be, tech people in the room, product managers, executive leaders, and I would sit there in silence because I was like, I don't know what question to ask. I don't know what problem we're trying to solve. And somehow I was still able to be successful in my career without like figuring out how to ask the right question. I remember getting to the Hartford, and Kathy Bromage is the chief marketing officer at the Hartford. She's phenomenal. She's retired now. But I remember Kathy, at the end of a lot of meetings, Kathy would say, like, do you guys have any questions? And I remember she pulled me to the side one day. She was like, you don't really ask a lot of questions. And I was like, Kathy, I really don't know what to ask. And she was like, why don't you just say that? Right? Like, why don't you just say, I don't know what to ask? You know, and she actually spent time coaching me, saying like, this is important. This is important. This is important. If you're not aware, ask, what is that? How does that impact the experience? Who are those customers? Do we have personas for them? So the fear of asking questions, you know, is a barrier to your success in this space. Once you remove that barrier, it makes designing 10x easier. So if you just remember that fun fact, right? Like the barrier to your growth in this space will correlate to the number of questions that you ask.
There's always going to be resistance to growth. I really hate to cut the session short, but we are running out of time. And for any one of you right out there who's looking for mentorship on leadership, I would say go and find Milton on ADPList. The talk he has given us is filled with wisdom, so I highly encourage you to book a session with him or just follow him right on his social media. And thank you so much, Milton, for making time for this. And I hope we get a chance to host you again in another meeting that we can go a bit deeper. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you around. Thank you.